Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sweet Life. I'm your host, TJ Sweet, and on this podcast, we're going to help you get from where you are to where you want to be in any and every area of your life. We're going to do that by helping you reshape your mindset, help you live with intention, and help you look at the world through a grateful lens. So I want to say thank you, first of all, for taking time to be willing to grow and learn through these episodes. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we get notifications, one, that the episode's out, but two, it's a really good reminder that you are somebody who's learning, who's growing. And that does something to us when we start to understand and affirm that that's actually who we are. We don't have to worry about being perfect. We just have to worry about getting better. And these episodes are part of your journey of progress. So as you know, we're talking a lot about leadership. We've shifted to talk about leadership, but leadership not as a title, but leadership is influence. Now, this episode's going to be a little bit more about the human side of leadership, the human side of being somebody who has the opportunity to lead or influence other people. This week, we're going to talk about vulnerability. It's not going to be the same type of structure that we typically have. I'm going to walk you through kind of what it is and how it can show up and the impact. But this one's really more about your self-awareness and your willingness to be humble enough, to be vulnerable enough, to not just be somebody in a leadership title, but to be somebody who's grateful for the opportunity to lead and who's grateful for the team that you have. That is what we're going to talk about today. So let's dive in to talk about the power of vulnerability in leadership. So leadership has kind of often been equated with strength and confidence and resilience and decision-making. While these qualities are essential, one powerful and often underutilized attribute that sets most inspiring leaders apart is vulnerability. Far from being a weakness, vulnerability is, it's in leadership, it builds trust and fosters open communication and creates a genuine connection with your team. When leaders embrace vulnerability, they pave the way for an organizational culture that values authenticity, learning, and support. So in my journey as a leader for over 20 years and as a coach, I've seen firsthand how vulnerability can actually strengthen relationships and drive their results. Leaders who are willing to show up as their true selves, admitting mistakes, asking for input, and acknowledging their own challenges, those leaders demonstrate a level of courage that resonates deeply with the rest of your team. Vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing or diminishing authority. Rather, it's about showing authenticity in a way that reminds others that we're all human, navigating challenges and learning along the way. Let's make leadership more human today. So let's talk about the role of vulnerability in leadership. So when leaders show vulnerability, they set an example that it's okay to be imperfect. This openness and humility fosters a sense of psychological safety, where team members feel comfortable sharing ideas and taking risks and voicing their concerns. In workplaces where vulnerability is valued, employees are more likely to collaborate, innovate, and engage because they know they're working in an environment that embraces the full range of the human experience. Now, why is vulnerability so impactful? Because it humanizes leadership. Leaders who are comfortable being vulnerable inspire teams to connect on a personal level, leading to a stronger team that's rooted in cohesion and trust and a sense of belonging. When leaders can say, I don't have all the answers, or I made a mistake and here's what I learned, they invite their teams to think critically and take initiative and engage on a much deeper level. So now, how does vulnerability drive connection and trust? Well, in leadership, vulnerability isn't about displaying weaknesses or talking down about yourself. It's about demonstrating the strength to be real. Let me walk you through some ways to hear, so that you can understand the impact that this has on a team culture. First thing is it encourages openness and innovation. When leaders model this vulnerability by openly discussing challenges or setbacks, what happens is they create a culture where team members feel safe to do the same. This openness is crucial for innovation, as team members are more likely to propose new ideas without fearing failure. The second thing it does is it fosters trust and loyalty. Vulnerability builds trust because it shows that leaders are genuinely invested in their team's success and well-being. Employees value authenticity. When they see a leader who's honest about challenges, they feel more respected and are more likely to reciprocate that honesty. Now, one of the most important things that it does is it creates and strengthens team cohesion. Leaders who show this vulnerability tend to build stronger and more cohesive teams. When leaders are transparent, team members feel encouraged to offer their full selves to the group, leading to greater collaboration, empathy, and teamwork. Now, how do you do this, right? So we create spaces for growth and learning. Vulnerable leaders foster and cultivate a culture of learning. When mistakes and failures are discussed openly, not hidden, they become opportunities for growth rather than a source of shame. Now, this not only improves morale, but also drives continuous improvement. So let me kind of walk through some examples of vulnerability in leadership. So throughout my own leadership and across my coaching experiences, I've seen leaders embrace vulnerability in some really powerful ways. And one executive I worked with made a list of, this idea of, how could he make a lasting impression on his team by acknowledging a strategic misstep during a project. Instead of covering it up, he gathered the team, explained his thought process, and invited feedback. His openness didn't weaken his leadership, it strengthened it. By creating a space for dialogue, he earned the respect and loyalty of his team. I saw it with my own eyes happen in the moment. And that demonstrated, that his willingness to make a mistake is also part of the process and the journey to success. Another example I can share is, comes from a manager who openly shared her challenges with work-life balance with her team. Rather than pretending that everything was under the control, everything was fine, she communicated her struggle and asked her team for their suggestions on streamlining some processes so that everybody would benefit from this. But this honestly not only alleviated her stress, but also empowered her team to propose effective solutions. Creating a supportive and collaborative environment. So these are really important things that a leader can do. So let me just share some ways on how to do this. So here's some tips for you on how to embrace the vulnerability. Building a culture of vulnerability starts with small, intentional actions. Here are a couple of practical steps that you can take to incorporate vulnerability into your leadership style. First, acknowledge your mistakes. It's humbling, but it's important. When you make a mistake, own it and own it openly and explain what you've learned. This shows accountability, some self-accountability, and models resilience, which encourages your team to approach setbacks constructively. Second thing is ask for feedback. Leaders often give feedback, but rarely ask for it and receive it. Create opportunities to ask your team for input on your performance, your decision-making, or even management style. This shows humility and fosters mutual respect. And another way is to share your own personal stories. Do not be afraid to share your personal experiences that relate to the challenges your team faces. When it's appropriate, these stories can create a bridge, kind of make the gap between you and your team stronger, creating empathy and understanding. But we also have to be willing to admit when we don't have the answers. Leadership doesn't require having all of the answers. It requires guiding the team towards finding them. Admitting that you don't have all of the answers actually encourages collaborative problem solving and shows that you have value in everyone's insights. Another really important piece of this is celebrating team efforts, not just the outcomes. When discussing successes, focus on the effort and dedication the team displayed, not just the final outcome. This really shows that you value in the process and the effort, reinforcing a culture of continual learning. So let's dive into the impact of vulnerability on a team culture. Now, a culture of vulnerability transforms teams from merely functioning groups into highly connected and engaged communities. When leaders show vulnerability, they create this ripple effect that encourages team members to bring their whole selves to work. This authenticity really improves communication, builds trust, and reduces turnover, right? As we know how important that is, as employees are more likely to stay with organizations where they feel understood and valued. See your team members as people first and the employees second. Teams led by vulnerable leaders are also more adaptable, able to pivot in times of crisis without the fear of judgment. This is especially valuable in today's dynamic business landscape where the ability to adapt quickly can make all of the difference. So let's talk about how do we get there, right? So the call to action this week is about embrace vulnerability in your leadership. If you're a leader, somebody that influences other people, consider a situation where you could show vulnerability. Perhaps it's admitting a mistake, asking for feedback, or sharing a personal challenge related to the team's current goals or struggles. Reflect on how this vulnerability could positively impact team morale, foster trust, and enhance your connections. By embracing vulnerability, you not only strengthen your leadership, but you also create a culture where everyone feels empowered to bring their best selves to work. Now, if this is something that you're interested in exploring and you want to learn how vulnerability can elevate your leadership approach and drive some team success, reach out to me. Let's connect. Through executive coaching and my keynote speaking that I get to do, I work with leaders at all levels, harnessing the power of authentic, vulnerable leadership that really builds the trust and inspires meaningful change that we all hope for as a leader. Together, let's create a culture where openness and authenticity thrive. It's not the aberration, it's the expectation that sets the stage for a stronger, more connected organization. Because we all want to have a positive impact as a leader on the teams that we get to work with. But sometimes we need to have that work that we do for ourselves to be more vulnerable, more humble, and more willing to be with our teams instead of be above our teams. Now, if this message resonates with you, like I said, reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you, maybe speak to your teams, speak to your leaders, because this is something when it's fully embraced, the impact transcends the team and the organization. So I hope this episode was inspiring. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now so you get notifications that remind you that you are a leader that is learning and growing and vulnerable and humble enough to know that we can always get better in certain areas of our life, but we can always improve and admit to where we need to grow in every area of our life. So I'll remind you, like I do with every episode, that you always have the power and the choice to reshape your mindset, live with intention, and look at the world through a grateful lens. Until the next episode, never stop.